Rev up your engines! Alright, today I got a 2015 Toyota Highlander, and it's got shaking problems in the front end that have been going on for quite some time. Now the owner admits it's his wife's car. She's a relatively aggressive driver, and they've changed the brakes in the front rotors twice and had them turned once. So what's up? Well, first let's take it for a road test. As you step on the brake, you can feel a little shuddering now, but we're going to take it higher speeds. As the faster your wheels are spinning in terms of miles an hour, the more it's going to accentuate any kind of problem in the front. Got plenty of pickup, so let's see what happens when we get going on the straightaway. Round we go, and nice handling for an SUV. We'll get it going. Now we're going 60. Let's see what happens when we hit the brakes. You can see the steering wheel has a little bit of shimmy to it. Conversely, when we do the same thing and step on the brake pedal, the brake pedal does not pulsate. If you had a problem in the back brakes, when you hit it hard, the brake pedal would pulsate because the back brakes would be warped and uneven, and that would make the pedal go up and down. But if you have a problem in the front brakes and you hit the brakes hard, that's going to make the steering wheel get vibrations, which is what it gets. So right away, we know the problem is in the front. Now that was at highway speeds. Now we're only going 20 miles an hour and I'm hitting the brakes, but the whole vehicle actually jerks worse. And it's doing it once it's warmed up after I've driven it a little while. We'll do it again. I can feel it jerking as it comes to a stop. And since it's doing it actually worse at a lower speed, that is showing there's a problem in the back. Because it's not the steering wheel shaking, as you can see. The whole vehicle kind of jitters, but the steering wheel doesn't move at all. So this has a very minor problem in the front brakes with a little shake and stopping at 60. But when you stop at low speeds, as you can see. So we're going to check the back first. So we'll put it in neutral so the wheels are up in the air. See if they have any drag. Here it's smoother. Here it drags a little. Then we'll go to the other side, try this side. It's dragging. It's not dragging. So we'll take the back wheels off and measure stuff. So pull up the wheel, and we'll do a few measurements. We'll take the brake caliper off first. Just take the bottom bolt off, and once you get it out, find the caliper slides up. So now we'll get it out of the way. It won't come off because this is in the way, so we'll remove the bolt here. Getting weak in my old age. There, now I had to loosen more of the wrench. Now we got this out of the way, we can flip it up. Now it's flipped up, we can get the brake pads out of the way. Once you get the pads out, you can measure this. We use a caliper measure, we can measure the thickness in various points. Now we'll start here. We want it so it's completely snug. Turn the screw till it's snug. Now it's snug the whole way. Then we're gonna turn it a bunch of degrees so it's further away, and we'll do the same measurement. Now, it slides too easily and has to be tightened up more before it grabs. Yet as we turn it even more, it's too tight here too. So this thing is warped. Now we can look at it, we can kind of figure that out by the eye too, because you can see this is smoother, that's rougher. It's not even anymore. Check out the wear on the pads themselves. You can see, there's lines, it turns around. They're not wearing evenly because the surface they're squeezing the rotor is no longer even. And that's interesting because this is one side where you see all the striations, yet the other side perfectly smooth. That means this side is more warped than the other side, which is often typical on this design because this is a cheaper one piston. This piston pushes in and out on the inside, so it relaxes better and releases. This, the entire caliper moves back and forth on the sliders, so often it's the outside pads are the ones that will drag, and that will cause warpage. Now, if you don't want to have a problem with this, you want to buy high quality OEM rotors and either OEM pads or I've had regular luck with the Akabono pads, which really are the best pads for wearing out. Now, here's the thing, I looked it up. You want to get factory OEM rotors, 385 bucks a piece. The pads are 115, so you're going to spend probably $1,000. This isn't hurting anything. It's mainly at the low speeds. It just kind of feels weird. They're thick as can be. There's tons left. Now, I can see from these pads, they're not the factory pads. And they probably have been changed with the worst pads a computer can think of. These are semi-metallic pads. See all those little pieces of metal in there? They stop great, but they're extremely aggressive. The metal in the pad wears the metal in the rotors. They wear out faster. Now, these rotors don't have any names on them, but I know they're aftermarket because Toyota doesn't make them these way. They paint them gray so they don't rust, so when you buy them, they don't look rusty. The rust doesn't hurt anything, it's superficial, but these have already been changed with aftermarket ones and aftermarket metallic pads. If you really, really don't want the vibration and the shaking, get the OEM rotors and get Akebono ceramic pads. The ceramic pads don't have metal crap in them. They don't make any noise and they last the longest. So as it stands now, hey, he's thinking about telling his wife not to worry about it. Now you can easily do this job yourself. You want to pay all that money in parts, but if you don't, you're putting it back together. Don't forget to put the hose bracket back on so it doesn't rub on the tires. It's there for a reason. And then put the caliper back on and then bolt it on nice and tight. You don't want the caliper coming loose. And of course, put the wheel back on. Now realize this isn't a safety issue. There's still tons of metal left on the rotor. Probably 90-something% of the brake pads left. I've had people drive them years this way, but it's also a warning. These have already been changed. If you're gonna change them, don't use cheaper rotors and do not use metallic brake pads. They stop perfectly fine. They actually stop sometimes a little bit better. That's why they use them on race cars. The metal grind stops them even faster. But on race cars, they change the brakes after every race. Do you really want to change your brakes and rotors every, 400 miles of racing? When you look closely, even with the tire on, you can see different striations. The striation showing that it's not wearing evenly. It should be totally even. And a lot of that is the metallic pads because the metal is not evenly spaced. It's random. So some parts will have more metal, some parts will have less metal. So the parts with more metal will wear the grooves, where the parts that have less metal, they won't wear as much, and you'll get an unevenly worn rotor. So the mystery's been solved. Mainly it was metallic brake pads, but it's totally safe to drive. If it really gets to a point where it starts shaking like mad, you don't like it, go ahead and replace it. But I've had people drive cars like this for 6-7 years that way, and they were still going down the road perfectly safely. As they wear, they're worn unevenly now, but they generally won't wear much more unevenly, so they'll stay at this level. And I've seen them sometime that after a while, they wear and they even out a little bit more from the other metal parts. As the brake pads wear down, they expose more metal that are on the inside of other parts. But really, don't use metallic brake pads if you want long life on your car. And here's some bonus questions and answers. DJW Falcon says, I got an 04 Jeep Grand Cherokee 4-wheel drive. The passenger side rear axle is leaking. The transmission has been overfilled for a while, and I noticed that things are wet. Clean everything off. Go to like a car wash, one of those pressure washers, get it hot, clean all the oil off. Then drive it and see where it's coming from. Since things are overfilled, when they're overfilled, that builds up too much pressure and that will make the seals leak. Pray it wasn't so overfilled that it blew the seals out, because if it blew the seals out, then, there's nothing you can do other than take it apart and pray there's no internal damage and replace the seals. They're seeping a little after you clean it off, and it's way overfilled. What I'd do first would be empty it out until it's the right level. Then drive it and see. If it's not leaking anymore, great. That fixed it, because overfill builds too much pressure and then it'll make the seals leak. But if it still leaks, then you're going to have to take the drive shafts off and you're going to have to put all new seals on the transaxles and on the transmission, because too much fluid builds up too much pressure and it can ruin the seals and pop them out. But you never know. Sometimes put it at the correct level, drive it, and it's not leaking anymore, great. But if it is, you're going to have to take it all apart and replace all the seals that have fluid coming out of them. And pray you don't have a bad front main seal where it connects to the transmission, because then you got to pull the whole transmission or the engine out to do it, and that's super expensive job. Michael Kirby says, my Volkswagen keeps blowing ignition coils. I have blown 7 ignition coils in the last 4 months. One melted through the top. No check engine lights, they just burn out. First, check the ground, the main ground going to the engine. Coils put out a tremendous amount of electricity, so it's got to have the power coming in, but it also has to be grounded. If the engine isn't grounded correctly, that strains the coils, they'll get super hot, and they'll melt. That makes total sense. That's probably what it is. If you want to do the quickest thing on earth, and I often do it on people's cars because it's an interesting experiment anyways, go to the negative battery terminal and connect a new ground cable. You can get an AutoZone big old long ground cable. It costs you $10, $12 or something. Add an additional ground. Bolt that onto the terminal, negative terminal, and then bolt that new wire on the engine on a nice solid bolt. Then drive it. You'll probably find that it won't melt them anymore. You can trace the grounds on it, but it's so easy. You just run a new one, an additional one, and stick it on. And the more the merrier when it comes to ground wire, and it's not going to hurt anything, and it will actually make any electronic thing work better because it's got a clean new ground with a brand new wire. And like I say, you just put in the negative terminal, so it's just a brand new ground. I leave the old ones, you don't want to take anything off, but it's not like you're hurting anything by adding an additional ground. The better ground you have, the better it's going to work. So try that, and you'll probably find it'll fix the whole thing, and they'll stop melting, they'll stop blowing them out. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.